was Rahab in the Bible. Today we'll dive into the inspiring story of Rahab, a figure who teaches us profound lessons about faith, courage, and transformation. Have you heard of Rahab? She appears in the book of Joshua in the Old Testament. But what makes her story so interesting? Rahab lived in the fortified city of Jericho, a strategic location that the Israelites aimed to conquer. Now you might be wondering, what makes her story so special? It's precisely her transformation. Rahab didn't have an easy past. She was known as a prostitute, which could have led many to reject her. However, her faith and obedience to God made her a crucial part of one of the most important moments in Israel's journey to the Promised Land. The name Rahab has Hebrew origins, and interestingly, it carries two possible meanings: abundant and broad. This is powerful because it can be interpreted as great in faith, or a woman whose faith is abundant. And that's exactly what we will see: how Rahab, despite a questionable past, demonstrated such intense faith that it transformed her life and even made her a part of the genealogy of Jesus Christ. Before we continue, if you're new here, I want to invite you to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any biblical stories. Let's begin Rahab's story. She lived in the ancient city of Jericho. The first time she's mentioned is in the book of Joshua, and the description is straightforward. She was a prostitute. Now, this may make you question, why would the Bible highlight someone with that occupation? But that's the beauty of Rahab's story. She shows us that God can use anyone regardless of their past to fulfill his purposes. The story begins when the Israelites, led by Joshua, were about to enter the Promised Land. Joshua sent 2 spies into the city of Jericho, and they ended up at Rahab's house. Yes, at the house of a woman with a past many would judge. But there, God's plan began to unfold in a surprising way. The spies followed Joshua's instructions and hid in Rahab's house. But it didn't take long for the king of Jericho to learn that there were Israelites in the city, spying on the territory. He sent a message to Rahab, demanding she hand over the spies. And what did she do? Instead of turning them in, she hid them on her roof among bundles of flax. To the king, she said that the men had already left and that if they hurried, they could catch them. Now, imagine the courage of this woman. She was risking her life. If discovered, she would likely be sentenced to death. But why did Rahab do this? This is where her extraordinary faith came into play. Before the spies went to sleep, she went up to the roof and made an impressive declaration of faith. She told them that she knew God had given the land to the Israelites and that the people of Jericho were afraid. She had heard of the miracles God had performed, like parting the Red Sea and defeating the Amorite kings, and her heart was filled with reverent fear. Rahab recognized that the God of Israel was the true God, both in heaven and on earth. Rahab then made a request of the spies. She knew Jericho was about to be destroyed, so she asked them to spare her life and that of her family. In exchange for her protection of the spies, she sought the salvation of her loved ones. The spies agreed with one condition: Rahab had to keep their mission a secret, and when the Israelites attacked the city, she was to tie a scarlet cord in her window, the same window through which she helped the spies escape. This detail of the scarlet cord is symbolic and deserves reflection. It reminds us of another significant event in biblical history: the Exodus. When God was about to send the final plague to Egypt, he instructed the Israelites to mark their doors with the blood of a lamb so that the angel of death would pass over their homes without harm. Similarly, Rahab's scarlet cord served as a sign of salvation, pointing to the great act of redemption that would later come through Jesus Christ. After her agreement with the spies, Rahab helped them escape through the window, and they fled to the hills, where they hid for 3 days until the searchers gave up. When the Israelites finally attacked Jericho, Rahab and her family were spared as promised. But Rahab's story doesn't end there. Her faith and actions brought about consequences she probably never imagined. Rahab was not only saved but also welcomed into the people of Israel. And amazingly, she became an ancestor of none other than Jesus Christ. In the book of Matthew, we find the genealogy of Jesus, and there is Rahab, mentioned as the mother of Boaz, who married Ruth. From their lineage came King David and later the Messiah. Additionally, Rahab is remembered in 2 significant passages in the New Testament. In the book of Hebrews, she's mentioned in the famous Hall of Faith, as an example of someone who, by faith, did not perish with the disobedient. In James, her actions are highlighted as an example of faith in action, showing that true faith is expressed through concrete deeds. So, what can we learn from Rahab's story? First, that God's grace is available to everyone. No matter what our past looks like, God sees the heart and can use us in mighty ways. Second, true faith leads to action. Rahab didn't just believe in God. She acted on that faith, protecting the spies and following their instructions, even at great personal risk. Moreover, we see that God can use anyone in any circumstance. Rahab, a marginalized woman, was placed in a strategic position that allowed her to help in the conquest of Jericho and become part of God's redemptive story. Her courage in the face of fear is an example for all of us. Lastly, Rahab's story reminds us that God's plans for our lives are greater than we can imagine. She had no idea that her actions in that moment would lead to her inclusion in the lineage of the Savior of the world. So, what does Rahab's story teach us? It challenges us not to judge people by their past but to see the potential for transformation that God sees in each of us. It also encourages us to act with courage and faith, even when everything seems against us. Rahab shows us that God can use the most unlikely circumstances to fulfill His plans, and when we trust in Him, our lives can have an impact far beyond what we can imagine. And now, a question for you to reflect on. How has Rahab's story impacted your view of faith, courage, and God's transformative power? Think about how you can apply these lessons in your daily life. Remember, just like Rahab, your acts of faith today can have a lasting effect that you may not even see yet. If you found this message inspiring, share it with others who might also be touched by this story. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more deep and inspiring biblical stories like this one. See you next time, and may God bless you.